Hey, move. Hey, son, get out of here. Get out of here.
Get away. Get away. Let's get a picture. Come on. No, let's move this way, Dave. Come on. Move this way, Dave. Come on.
Watch it now.
Come on, you're only going to get hurt now, please.
Until he felt police were getting close. Then he decided to take the .45 caliber machine gun, commit mass murder at a Long Island disco, and fight it out with Suffolk police in a blaze of glory.
A killer on the loose in New York for a year and 3 days.
Ronald Sisman and Elizabeth Platzman were found lifeless in an apartment, lying in their own bloodbath, killed by an unknown group of killers who had planned the murders too perfectly to carry under the plain sight of the creeping night of Halloween. A crime committed on the eve of Halloween couldn't be more perfect. As the season for trick-and-treats is right around the corner, it's the perfect time for a murder story whose unsolved mystery is spooking out the people even after 4 decades. Did revenge drive the killings? Or was the timing too perfect for something far darker, like sacrificial rituals carried out by members of a satanic cult? The rumored involvement of the notorious serial killer, Son of Sam, who had committed his crimes to obey demons, only intensified the questions surrounding this chilling case. New York in the 1980s was a cultural birthplace for artists aiming to get on top, and a hideout for criminals who were involved in the most violent and grotesque crimes. With the rise in disturbing occurrences of people disappearing and getting killed, the unhappy locals who generated a big chunk of the city's economy chose to move out of the town. This pulled in a lot of punks and starving characters to reside in New York. Before the glorification of Times Square in particular, the walls of the streets were stained with the horrifying crisis of AIDS and drugs, followed by heinous serial killings. In the rougher areas of the city, the young lot only had the choice to either join a gang or become one of their targets. They were the most dangerous years the city had ever seen. It was one of the most dangerous eras the city had seen. As unsettling and dark as that period was, the Big Apple was also full of opportunities for budding photographers like Ronald Sisman.
The people of the city of New York can rest easy this morning because of the fact that the police have captured a man whom they believe to be the Son of Sam.
David Berkowitz was 24, a pudgy postal worker who lived in the New York City suburb of Yonkers. He readily confessed, telling a bizarre tale of how he had been commanded to kill by a neighbor's dog.
Halloween night in 1981 was supposed to be no different. New York City was alive with people dressed up in costumes and masks. But in the crowd of fake ghosts and monsters, a group wasn't just pretending. That night, the unknown bunch of people had decided to go from pretending to be scary clowns to executing a double murder feast. The next morning, the city woke up to the terrifying breaking news of the brutal double murder that had shaken the heart of Manhattan last night. The names Ronald Sisman and Elizabeth Platzman, printed on the front page, would soon be remembered by people on Halloween for decades to come, as their unsolved murders became one of the city's classic Halloween mysteries. On October 31, 1981, a bloody slaughter had taken place at a duplex apartment on 207 W 22nd St. Chelsea. It was the peak time for trick-and-treating when a neighbor, making his way through the corridor, noticed something strange about the apartment on the 3rd floor. The place looked like it had been turned upside down, with every item in there scattered all over the floor. What the neighbor's eyes caught next would haunt him forever. The walls were covered with unmistakable red splashes. The 20-year-old Elizabeth, a bright college student, and her boyfriend, 39-year-old photographer Ronald, were found dead in cold blood. Their bodies, lying motionless on the floor, were shot in the head, execution style. The room was ransacked as if someone had been searching for something important, something worth killing for. In a state of shock, the neighbor immediately called the police. Within minutes, officers were seen stepping foot inside the gory crime scene. They struggled to make sense of it. Was it a case of robbery gone wrong, or was something evil at play? The state in which the bodies were discovered screamed of a deeply personal motive behind the crime. The couple was shot at the back of their heads, and the impact of the wound made it clear that the killer was standing in close proximity to the victims. The bruises on their body confirmed that they were severely beaten up before being shot. This act of violence appeared calculated. Although the place had been left as if the intention of the killers was actually not to kill, but to rob the apartment, there was one highly unsettling detail. No valuable belonging was missing from the flat. Photographs were scattered all over the place as if the intruders had tossed them while looking for something specific. It looked like the couple was killed for getting in their way. The only two items noticeably absent from the horror scene were Ronald's .25 caliber pistol and the IDs of both the victims. What they were actually looking for would eventually lead to one of the more compelling theories of this unsolved, timeless case. The timing of the crime, paired with its cold execution, made it feel anything but random. Taking place on a night known for its spooky traditions, the murders felt disturbingly intentional. There was no obvious motive, no sign of a struggle. Many began to wonder if this was perhaps a ritual or a sacrificial killing. It was Halloween, a time when the members of satanic cults were known to become active. Ritualistic crimes committed in the name of dark forces have been recorded throughout history. Moreover, they had removed all sorts of identification from their body, a pattern commonly noted in cult-related murders. Evidence and rumors over the years have always pointed to secret networks of demonic cults involved in perfectly planned killings. Who was this couple, and why did they become the target of such an ill-fated tragedy? Despite this case still carrying the major question of who committed the crime unanswered, it hinted towards the undeniable link with a satanic cult. Ronald was a freelance photographer trying to make big in the media industry. At the age of 39, he was successful in having some great connections and famous names in his portfolio. Elizabeth, on the other hand, was an honor student. The two were said to be dating, but they hadn't known each other for a long time. Just a few weeks before the tragic event, Elizabeth had been introduced to Ronald by her cousin, Hilary Sklar. Hilary's husband, Stuart, happened to be Ronald's business partner at his photography studios, Universal Poster and Postergraphs, Incorporated. At that time, Ronald was running both of his photography businesses from his apartment in Manhattan, the very same living place where the killers would later tear apart all the furnishings and studio setup in the desperate search for a cursed item that was believed to be the reason behind the death of Ronald and Elizabeth. Elizabeth was a young woman whose life, once filled with gentleness, became a horrifying tragedy that would be talked about for ages to come. There was nothing common between the luxurious life she lived and the way she was brutally beaten up and shot to death. Elizabeth came from a wealthy background. She spent her childhood in a landmark house near Roslyn Park on Long Island. The 20-year-old enjoyed the peaceful views of one of Nassau County's most beautiful areas while studying in one of its finest private educational institutes. Her life growing up in her family's pre-Civil War wood-frame home was surrounded by people who adored her. She was known as a sweet and caring girl in her neighborhood. Life, in short, was quite comfortable for Elizabeth. Little did she know that her path would soon cross with a love interest who would lead her to her gut-wrenching death in cold blood. Lovingly called Liz by her friends and neighbors, Elizabeth was an academically successful student who pursued her dream field of art and academics in the exclusive private school, the Friends Academy. Determined to make a successful career for herself, she then joined Amherst College in Massachusetts after graduating from the academy in 1979. She was an aspiring student with big dreams who had just completed her honors drama program when her life intertwined with the cursed fate of Ronald. Ronald, a prolific photographer, enjoyed the artistic life he had created for himself. Driven by his passion, the man had several ties with influential people, including the infamous film producer Roy Radin. Ronald wasn't like Elizabeth, whose life had been quite normal before everything took a sudden, unexpected turn for her. Ronald was a man of many secrets, a very private man involved in many suspicious and discreet activities. He was found to be involved in the tragic assault case of the famous model and actress Melanie Haller. Melanie was known in the 1970s for her small roles in different TV shows. The actress, who used to model for Playboy magazine, was an aspiring artist, trying her best to find connections within the industry who could boost her acting career. It was during one of her shoots that she met Ronald. Soon, the summers of 1980 would make her life take a dark turn. On the night of 12th April 1980, Melanie Haller found herself at a dinner party hosted by producer Roy at his home in Southampton, Long Island. She had been introduced to the film producer by none other than Ronald. What she didn't realize then was that her hopes of getting a breakthrough in her struggling acting career would soon lead her to a disturbing experience. The following morning, Melanie was discovered by a railroad conductor on a commuter train that was on its way to Manhattan. What came as a horror for the conductor was the horrific state the model was found in. She was unconscious, with her body drenched in blood. In a heart-aching account, Melanie reported that she had been beaten and sexually assaulted during the party at Roy's 72-room mansion. As per her statement, the producer, Roy, was not alone in carrying out the heinous crime. The associates present at the party took part in it too. She even claimed that he recorded the shocking sexual acts played on her and others invited that night. The bruises and blood on her body were clear indications of the physical abuse she had sustained, but the horrifying details didn't just end here. Her statement to the Southampton Village Police alleged that Roy and his friends had even forced her to play sexual games, including the non-consensual act of oral and anal. At one point, she was being drugged at gunpoint as well. In response to the serious allegations, Roy insisted that they had Melanie's consent for all the sexual games that were played during the gathering. Soon, it became a widely talked about case in the New York City. Though no allegations of sexual assault were proven against the film producer, he was charged with a $1,000 fine and probation of 3 years for illegal possession of a firearm. A businessman, Robert McKeege, also emerged in the scandal, where he was sentenced to a month in prison for pleading guilty to his involvement in the assault. What makes this blood-curdling tale of harassment related to the unsolved Halloween mystery is Ronald's connection to it. Though Ronald wasn't directly involved in the crime, there still were compelling reasons for suspicion to fall on him. Ronald came under the spotlight after the model attempted suicide. While receiving treatment at Mount Sinai Medical Center, Melanie revealed to doctors that she was forced to use heroin by Roy. Deeply affected by the huge blow to his reputation in the film industry after the scandal, Roy Rayton was said to have threatened Melanie's life if she refused to take the drug. As the incident was further inspected, Ronald's name emerged during the investigation. He was said to be giving Valium, an anti-anxiety drug, to the supermodel. In his defense, Ronald claimed that he was only trying to help Melanie cope with her stress disorders after the incident. What raised suspicions was the timing of events. Radden's visit to Ronald's duplex happened to be just a week before Ronald gave Valium to Melanie, which was followed by her suicide attempt. Ronald believed he was skillfully hiding his secretive activities from the people around him, but the reality was quite different. His suspicious behavior had caught the eyes of both his neighbors and the superintendent of the apartment building. They kept an indirect tab on the shady activities that Ronald seemed to be involved in. The superintendent observed that Ronald Sisman was a secretive guy who used to be up at odd hours. People would come in and out of his apartment at late hours of the night. His neighbors later revealed that they had long suspicions that Ronald was supplying cocaine to a regular group of clients, and they believed the murders might have been connected to drugs. Though police did find a small amount of cocaine-like substance in his apartment, no other packs of drugs were discovered. But this theory seemed plausible, especially when people considered Ronald's connection to the Melanie Haller case. There was a mysterious element present in the character of Ronald. Did he have any secret he was trying to hide? His neighbors recalled how seriously he took matters of security. Ronald had filed for 2 gun permits after a break-in at his apartment left him fearing for his life. He also had a bunch of cameras set up at his place, and he was the only one in the building who didn't share his key with the superintendent. One of the first officers on the crime scene reported that numerous photos found in the apartment were of different models. This gave birth to another unsettling theory. They thought that the reason behind the murders could be illegal pornographic activities possibly happening in Ronald's apartment. The media reports at that time tried linking the case to this theory, as sexually explicit material was indeed found in his place. However, these claims were debunked by the authorities over the lack of solid evidence. During the investigation, the police held onto the hope that a neighbor might have witnessed or heard something unusual on Halloween night. However, the crime had been carried out with such precision that it had no leads for them to follow at first. Upon inquiry from the people who knew Ronald, one of his friends revealed that Ronald had shut down his studios and shifted them to his apartment some weeks prior to his murder. At this time, Elizabeth started visiting his place more often. Even on the night of Halloween, the couple had plans to do a photo shoot. Ronald was set to photograph his girlfriend just moments before the double homicide took place. The lack of forced entry, infliction of violence, and the number of bullets fired, 4 at Ronald and 3 at Elizabeth, raised the possibility among the authorities that the attacker could have been someone who Ronald knew. But the real twist in the mystery surfaced when rumors of a notorious serial killer's involvement began to echo through the city. This killer was already behind bars after the convictions of his gruesome crimes. The people of New York must have felt a wave of chills when the name of David Richard Berkowitz, aka Son of Sam, made headlines for this case.
Police have captured a man whom they believe to be the Son of Sam.
The .44 caliber killer involved in shooting 6 people to death. His terror was felt throughout the country. How could he possibly be involved in this case? If he were indeed the mastermind behind the murders, what motive could he have had for targeting a couple in their apartment on Halloween?
David Berkowitz was 24, a pudgy postal worker who lived in the New York City suburb of Yonkers.
The infamous killings were initially believed to be the work of the lone gunman, David Berkowitz. However, over the years, new theories began to emerge, suggesting that the murders were part of something much bigger. Research and theories proposed that there were more than one Sons of Sam present, and that the murders were the work of an organized network tied to an underground satanic cult.
I ran into some bad people that were not, they were just into some occult stuff.
Many started to believe this theory as David Berkowitz himself admitted to being part of such a cult. David confessed he was responsible for only 3 of the 6 murders he was sentenced for. As per him, other shooters from the cult were involved in the rest. While exposing the disturbing reality of the cult, he revealed how he and his fellow cult members used to properly plan the attacks by stalking their victims and taking on roles like drivers during the killings.
So, I just got a satanic Bible. I started to read that. Some other guys thought that we should get,
Is that from this cult group?
it was a group. It was a group of people that, and so I would just say some prayers and make promises to the devil. I came under some strange teachings which talked about the end of the world, and we have to do our part to bring in the end of the world to set up the new millennium.
Whenever David Berkowitz had a chance to talk about his life in interviews, he always reaffirmed the presence of the cult. Suddenly, the murders of Ronald and Elizabeth began appearing far more horrific as their deaths mirrored the unsettling methods Berkowitz had described. Yet the motive for specifically targeting Ronald and Elizabeth remained unclear. Did they have a connection to such a sinister network? The tangled knots in this dead-end case are complicated. Despite the culprits still not being found, there had been plenty of claims and accounts that seemed to tie the murders to satanic cults. At that time, the investigation took a strange turn when police received an unexpected tip from an informant. He revealed that a couple of weeks before the murders, David Berkowitz revealed to him that his cult had locked their next target to torture and kill as a ritual on Halloween. David had even revealed the after-ritual plan to him. The cult members intended to kill the residents and erase any piece of evidence that could link back to them. This revelation finally pointed to the cursed item that was said to be in Ronald's possession, something his killers were desperately after. Allegedly, the cult member had hired someone to record the murder of Stacy Moskowitz, who was the last victim of the Son of Sam. And as the twists in this case never seemed to stop, the cameraman was none other than Ronald Sisman, who was hired to shoot a film without being told what it involved. By the time Ronald realized that he had unwillingly become a part of a ritual killing, it was already too late for him. The cursed item in his possession was the videotape, evidence which, if leaked, would have exposed the secret, sinister life of satanic cult members. The cult members knew Ronald was a dangerous loose end, holding solid evidence against them. When they found out he was already under the police's radar for drug-related cases, they feared he might use the video to negotiate with authorities. Hence, he had to be their next target. With no evidence to prove the claims and theories, many actually found this mystery solved. The cult members who appeared in clown masks on his door were after the snuff video. The detectives eventually concluded that Elizabeth's tragedy was probably a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Although the identities of the culprits remain a secret, the motive behind the chilling, cold-blooded murders is largely believed to be uncovered.